The wind howled outside like a wounded animal, shaking the old cabin so hard that the windows rattled in their frames. Snow crashed against the glass in thick waves, swallowing the world beyond. Inside, the dim light of a single lantern flickered across tired faces, and a single father sat awake through the night, terrified that by morning he might lose the last piece of family he had left. Before we begin this emotional story, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to A Journey of Hearts if you believe kindness, forgiveness, and second chances can change lives. Your support helps us bring more heartwarming stories to people around the world. The storm had arrived without warning. Ronan Hale had planned nothing more than a quick drive through the mountains with his 8-year-old daughter, Maris. They were heading toward a small town where his stepsister, Corinne, had recently moved after accepting a teaching position at a rural school. Life had not been easy for Ronan. 3 years earlier, his wife had passed away after a sudden illness, leaving him alone to raise their daughter. The grief had nearly destroyed him. Every day felt like walking through deep water. Every smile required effort. Every morning felt heavier than the one before. Yet he kept moving forward because Maris needed him. Corinne had entered his life when both of them were teenagers. Their parents had married late in life, blending two wounded families into one awkward household. They had never been particularly close. Corinne was quiet, reserved, and difficult to understand. Ronan was outgoing and restless. Over the years, they drifted apart. After their parents passed away within months of each other, the distance grew even wider. Then, out of nowhere, Corinne had called him. It was the first conversation they had shared in nearly 2 years. Her voice sounded weak. She insisted she was fine, but Ronan could hear exhaustion hiding behind every word. Something about that call stayed with him. A week later, he decided to visit. What should have been a simple trip became a nightmare. Halfway through the mountain road, the storm arrived. Snow fell so heavily that visibility disappeared within minutes. The road became impossible to navigate. Ronan barely managed to guide his vehicle toward an abandoned ranger cabin before the blizzard completely trapped them. When they entered the cabin, they were shocked to discover someone already inside. It was Corinne. She had been driving home from town when the weather turned dangerous. Her car had slid off the road nearby. She had managed to reach the cabin on foot before collapsing from exhaustion. The moment Ronan saw her, he realized something was terribly wrong. Her face was pale. Her hands trembled. Her breathing sounded strained. She was burning with fever. The nearest hospital was hours away under normal conditions. During a blizzard, it might as well have been on another planet. There was no choice. They would have to survive the night. The cabin only contained one small room and a narrow sleeping area. The freezing temperatures made it dangerous to stay separated. Ronan built a fire while wrapping blankets around Maris and Corinne. As darkness consumed the mountains outside, the storm grew even stronger. Hours passed. The cabin groaned beneath the weight of snow. Maris eventually fell asleep beside the fire. Corinne remained awake. She stared into the flames with distant eyes. Ronan could tell she was struggling. Not only physically. Emotionally. The kind of pain that medicine could not fix. For years, he had assumed she preferred being alone. Now he wondered if loneliness had simply become her prison. The fever worsened after midnight. Corinne began shivering uncontrollably despite the blankets. To keep her warm, Ronan moved closer, sharing the limited heat available inside the tiny sleeping area. The situation felt strange at first. Not because of discomfort. Because it reminded him of something he had forgotten. Family. For so many years, everyone had been scattered by grief, loss, and distance. Now a storm had forced them together again. Outside, the blizzard continued raging. Inside, memories began returning. They talked quietly about their parents. About childhood mistakes. About family holidays. About laughter they had not shared in years. The conversation felt fragile. Like an old bridge slowly being rebuilt. Near 3 in the morning, Corinne's condition appeared to worsen. Her eyes filled with tears. For a long moment she remained silent. Then she whispered something so softly that Ronan almost missed it. She told him she was scared. Not of the storm. Not of the illness. She was scared of being forgotten. The word struck him harder than anything else that night. All those years he had assumed she wanted distance. All those years he believed she preferred solitude. The truth was completely different. After their parents died, Corinne felt abandoned. Every birthday passed quietly. Every holiday felt empty. Every achievement went unnoticed. She spent years convincing herself she did not need anyone. But deep down, she longed for connection. For family. For someone to remember she existed. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she admitted something she had never told another person. When Ronan's wife died, she wanted to help. She wanted to call. She wanted to visit. But she felt like an outsider. The longer she waited, the harder it became. Eventually silence built walls neither of them knew how to cross. Ronan felt guilt tightening around his chest. He had spent years drowning in his own grief. In the process, he never considered how others might be suffering too. Especially someone who had lost the same parents. Someone who was carrying her own loneliness. For a long time neither of them spoke. The fire crackled softly. Snow battered the roof. Maris slept peacefully nearby. Then Ronan reached out and gently squeezed Corinne's hand. He promised she would never be forgotten. Not again. The words seemed simple. Yet something changed in her expression. For the first time that night, a small smile appeared. Morning did not arrive easily. The storm continued through dawn. Food supplies were limited. The cabin remained freezing despite the fire. Corinne's fever fluctuated dangerously. Ronan spent every hour caring for both his daughter and his stepsister while fighting exhaustion himself. Yet something unexpected happened. The hardship brought them closer. Maris began telling stories to make Corinne laugh. Corinne shared memories of their grandmother. Ronan listened as years of silence slowly dissolved. The little cabin became more than shelter. It became a place of healing. Late that afternoon, the storm finally weakened. Rescue crews began searching mountain roads. Hours later, a ranger spotted smoke from their chimney. Help had arrived. The journey to the hospital was difficult but successful. Doctors confirmed that Corinne was suffering from severe pneumonia that could have become life-threatening if left untreated much longer. The news shook everyone. Another few days alone might have changed everything. Recovery took weeks. But something remarkable happened during that time. Ronan and Maris visited often. Then they visited more. Soon weekly visits became family dinners. Family dinners became traditions. Traditions became a new beginning. The empty spaces left behind by loss slowly filled with connection. Months later, spring arrived. The mountains transformed from white silence into fields of green. Flowers bloomed along the hillsides. Birdsong replaced the winter winds. One sunny afternoon, Ronan organized a small gathering in his backyard. Friends, neighbors, and relatives filled the space with laughter. Children ran across the grass. Maris played games with her friends. Corinne stood quietly beneath a tree watching everything unfold. Ronan noticed tears in her eyes. This time they were different tears. Not tears of loneliness. Not tears of fear. They were tears of belonging. For the first time in many years, she was surrounded by people who cared whether she showed up. People who called. People who remembered. People who loved her. As the sun began setting, Maris handed Corinne a handmade card. Inside was a simple message written in uneven handwriting. It said that family is not measured by distance or time. Family is measured by who stays when life becomes difficult. Corinne cried openly. So did Ronan. Because the little girl had expressed a truth that took adults years to understand. Life often pulls people apart. Pain builds walls. Pride creates silence. Loss convinces us to retreat from one another. But healing begins the moment someone chooses to reach back. Before we reach the ending, if this story has touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to A Journey of Hearts. Your engagement helps spread stories of hope and reminds others that no one has to face life's storms alone. Glowing star special request, comment below with the words, "Family matters," if you believe no loved one should ever feel forgotten. Years later, whenever people asked Ronan about the worst storm he had ever survived, he always smiled before answering. Because the storm itself was not what he remembered most. He remembered a tiny cabin hidden beneath endless snow. He remembered a frightened whisper in the middle of the night. And he remembered the moment a broken family found its way back to one another. Sometimes the most powerful changes do not arrive through grand miracles. Sometimes they arrive through a single sentence spoken in the darkness. A sentence that reminds us we are loved. A sentence that reminds us we belong. A sentence that changes everything. And for Ronan, Corinne, and Maris, that whisper became the beginning of a new family story, one built not on the pain they had endured, but on the love they finally chose to share.